Now this might sound crazy, but Marvel Rivals has a lot in common with Overwatch. There's things that it does better, and things that it does worse. Though considering the state of Overwatch these days, that first category is a lot bigger than the second one. Even so, one place that Overwatch outdoes Rivals is in communicating things to the player. Simply put, Marvel Rivals sucks at telling you things. This manifests in many ways, from unclear visual design, to environmental inconsistency, to withholding vital information. There's a lot to go over. If I tried to cover every way the game gets this wrong, we'd be here all day. Let's waste no time. So first, unclear visual design. There's no better example of this than the way the game handles healing. In Overwatch, all healing has a universal color. Now, making that color piss yellow was an interesting choice, but it means that healing is very clearly marked as such. Now, while Overwatch isn't 100% perfect at upholding this rule, it's reliable enough that you can very safely assume yellow is healing without any issue. The last time I played Overwatch was before Juno came out. When I was collecting footage, I got the moment of the very first time I ever saw her ultimate. I initially jumped away in panic because I had basically been flashbanged by it, but once I actually looked at it, I could immediately tell that it was a heal simply because of its coloration. Marvel Rivals has no such consistency. Most of the healing is this light blue, which I quite like. It's soothing and doesn't look like piss. But that color is not only used by heals. Damage buffs and lightning are also blue. This is the most intrusive when it comes to Thor's lightning confinement, which looks nearly identical to Cloak and Dagger's heal bubble. Sure, when things are calm, it's easy to see the details which set them apart, but in the heat of combat, with a dozen people fighting in and around it, they're nearly impossible to differentiate. This has gotten me killed when I've run into the Thor bubble expecting heals. I think it would make sense to have lightning and damage boost be the same color, since Storm's design ties those two things together. But it should be yellow. You know, like the lightning bolt in the game's icon. However, this wouldn't solve all the issues, since not all healing is blue. Some of it is yellow or green. There is no consistent heal color. This has major gameplay effects, since if you're actively looking for healing, you're almost certainly near death. You need to be able to find it instantly. Now, some healing, such as Mantis's Healing Flower and Adam's Lifestream, cannot miss. It's a direct heal applied to you from the healer. In these cases, the impacts of them being off-color aren't as bad, but they should still follow a consistent color scheme to help reinforce a pattern in the player's mind. All healing should be light blue. Not green, not yellow, and especially not purple. Let's talk about Cloak and Dagger's ultimate ability. They put down a curtain all along the field that damages enemies and heals allies, and it's purple. There is no other heal in the game that is purple. All the other healing done by this character is blue. The things they do that are purple only affect the enemy. They're attacks which ignore you, and thus you are trained to ignore them. Not only that, when you get blinded by an enemy cloak, your screen turns purple, even if the attack appears as red. This means that the player categorizes purple as neutral to bad, and so they have absolutely no reason to put together that this purple is actually really good. It took the general player base weeks to grasp en masse that this heals you, and new players usually won't know until another player tells them. This carpet should be light blue, just like all healing should be. I never realized for myself that this heals you. I learned it from the subreddit, but I was able to tell that Juno's ultimate healed you the very first time I laid my eyes on it. Also, you know how I said that the enemy cloak's attacks appear red? That applies to the enemy dagger's healing as well. In fact, nearly all enemy healing is red. Now, this is good because it means that you're never going to confuse an ally's healing with an enemy's healing, but it has its own set of problems. Pretty much everything the enemy has is red, which means it's hard to tell at a glance what is dangerous and what is merely not beneficial. Dagger domes, Jeff bubbles, and rocket orbs are harmless to you, but they're the same shade of red as things that are dangerous. Things that are harmless to you should be a much softer red than the things that can hurt you. And don't even get me started on Scarlet Witch's Dark Seal, which is red even when it's placed by your ally. Unfortunately, it's very rare to have 2 Scarlet Witches in a single game because she kinda sucks. The thing is that the enemy stuff is red isn't really as hard of a rule as it should be. Penny's mines are the color of their mech, meaning you can end up with red friendly mines and blue enemy mines, or the same color mines with only the spinning lasers to differentiate them, but it's at its worst with Luna Snow's ult. An ally and an enemy Luna Snow ultimate have identical effects going on in the center of the circle. The big pixelated dancing snowflake doesn't change, only the color of the ring on the outside of the ultimate changes, which means that when 2 Luna Snows ult at the same time, something which happens a lot, it is so easy to lose track of which effect you're supposed to stay inside. This has gotten me killed when I start hugging the wrong Luna. Anyways, I've pretty much entirely focused on abilities up to this point. What about the actual characters? Well, they look great. The design in this game is pretty much top tier across the board. Any complaints I have are kind of just things that come with the territory of comic book characters. So they did a bang up job. But how good it looks is sadly irrelevant. I'm sure we can all agree how vital recognizability is in hero shooters, but simply put, purchasable cosmetics as a whole are inherently at odds with recognizable character models, since the more distinct a skin is, the more enticing it is, and thus the more it sells. Generally speaking, Overwatch is pretty good at making skins unique, while still keeping the character easily recognizable. Compare it to Team Fortress 2, which in my opinion let its cosmetics get way out of hand. So, on the Overwatch to TF2 scale, where does Marvel Rivals fit in? I'd say it's somewhere around... It's worse than TF2. Not universally, there are still plenty of characters that I think manage to be distinct no matter what skin they have. Jeff, Squirrel Girl, Rocket, they've got features that make them stand out a ton no matter how much you mess with their look. Features so prominent that they're still instantly recognizable. Other characters have designs that are distinct in much more subtle ways. Funny enough, one of the characters that I think they really got right on this front is Thor, the same guy with this terrible confusing bubble. Where most of the buff characters are built like Crash Bandicoot, Thor is huge while also being balanced between his upper and lower body. His main way of fighting is with a big ol' hammer that glows bright blue while it's in use, and he leaves a lot of very visible lightning trails. Even when his cosmetics change his actual silhouette a ton, he is still very easy to recognize. However, that cannot be said about every character. Let's talk about Captain America. You would think he would have one of the most crystal clear silhouettes. His shield is iconic and nobody else fights by swinging a big old dish around. But that's not how it shakes out. His main punches are incredibly understated with minimal particle effects. They look more generic than most of the token melee attacks that every other hero has. He does throw his shield plenty, but it's quite small and gets super easily lost in the fray. Especially since it doesn't even have a consistent look. It varies drastically between his different skins. This is the main thing that's supposed to make him instantly recognizable as Captain America, and yet it has no consistency. I truly think he has the worst skins in the game when it comes to visual clarity. In particular, his mustard suit looks very similar to Wolverine's MCU skin. It's the exact same yellow with a rounded helmet, and their proportions barely differ. These two skins are very difficult to tell apart. Their distinguishing features do not jump out nearly as much as the things that they have in common. However, these are at the very least premium skins, and the Captain America one doesn't really see a ton of use. Much more egregious is the default skins for Dagger and Invisible Woman. Do I really need to explain this? Look at them! You might say that it doesn't really matter, since they're both squishy healers. If you see them, you should be trying to kill them, whereas Captain America and Wolverine require different responses and counterplay. And I agree with that to a point, but where it can screw you is when they ult. Both of them have healing ultimates that cease to exist if they die. This means that if you're able to hit them with burst damage, their big I win maneuver gets cancelled. But to do that, you need to be able to target the right one. And this is a problem that they created for themselves because the Fantastic Four suits are normally blue. Making it look like this was the game's decision. Alright, that's enough about character models. The next thing I want to talk about is environmental inconsistency. Now, I love the destructible terrain. I think it adds a lot to the game and makes those big explosive attacks feel much more impactful. But there are again problems with conveying information to the player. It is flat out impossible to tell what is destructible simply by looking at it. For me, the absolute pinnacle of destruction in games is Red Faction Guerrilla. But even if you just want to limit the comparison to multiplayer games, Rainbow Six Siege absolutely laps rivals in terms of making it clear what can be broken. It is very possible to convey this well. Marvel Rivals doesn't even try, and to make up for that, it just gives you a button that shows you what can be destroyed. At least this button does a good job making it clear how arbitrary it really is. Massive sections of the same wall are split randomly between what can and cannot be broken. It is simply not possible to intuit what you can break here. But a lot of the time, this really isn't too intrusive. If you accidentally use a destructible wall as cover, you'll pretty much always have time to react and relocate as soon as you see the first chunk of it get blown apart. The main exception here is the Punisher. His turret, ultimate, and team up with Rocket all do the same thing. Put a ton of bullets downrange. The turret is stationary and generally something that you're moving towards, so you're rarely caught out by it. But the latter two options are things that can be broken out mid-fight and only last for a limited duration, so the best response when you see them is to run for cover. And in this situation, you do not have time to go into terrain analysis mode, you just need to run into cover ASAP. And if you run behind a piece of destructible terrain, you're screwed. He's able to shred it and start killing you before you're able to properly react. Now you might say that that really isn't too big of an issue. One single character who sometimes causes issues due to the terrain. But it doesn't have to be an issue at all. If they just better conveyed what was destructible, this would not be a problem. Instead, it's yet another issue caused by the game's general failure at visual communication. Destructibility isn't the only thing that the environments fail to communicate. This game absolutely loves its invisible walls. Now, okay, some of these make sense. Since characters can fly, the only way to avoid invisible walls at the map borders would be to have every match set in a box. That's not the issue. The problem is the invisible walls within the map when you have characters this mobile. For example, let's look at this spot behind a billboard on Midtown. It makes sense that you can't get in here, but like, how hard would it have been to just have some scaffolding or stairs in the way to make it clear? It feels so bad to just rub your face against a wall in a spot you should be able to cut through. This can slow you down quite a bit if you try to get clever with your movement, only to end up being blocked. And while I'm complaining about level geometry, it's super inconsistent what you can stand on and what you slide on. Look at these roofs. They're all angled, but some are perfectly fine to stand on and others slide you right off. Or the specific bit of Shin Shibuya. It's flat, yet you still slide. I don't really have anything else to say about it. It's yet another small issue compounding with the rest. And finally, the last category of sin that I want to go over is when the game flat out refuses to tell the player important information. Let's talk about Wolverine again. When the game first came out, the general consensus was that he was a terrible character, absolutely worthless. And now, he's banned in pretty much every high-level match. He did get buffs to his survivability in Season 1, but that isn't what brought him from F to S tier. No, what happened is that people learned how he functions as a character. Wolverine does percentile damage, meaning that his hits do more damage the more max health a character has. But this is not told to you anywhere in the game. So what happened is that people would try and attack squishy targets like healers, but because they have less max health, they would take barely any damage. And since Wolverine would struggle to kill even the squishiest characters, people wrote him off as worthless. But when he attacks a tank, he does massive damage. At times, he can even shred them apart faster than they can be healed, since healing is a flat amount. However, why would you ever think to attack Hulk as a character that can't even kill Bruce Banner? And I want to point out that Scarlet Witch also does percentile damage, but it is explicitly mentioned in her character profile. This makes the omission from Wolverine's profile even more egregious, because it means that you're expected to treat flat damage as the default and percentile as the exception. This is a running issue, where character profiles just leave out critical information. Let's look at Thor's bubble again. It just loves causing problems. Its description says that it gives you Thor force for each enemy you hit with it, which is not wrong, but it also slows and damages enemies that cross the boundary. How can you leave this much out? The majority of the functionality is just not told to you. Now listen, I think it would be fine if the profile you pull up in-game was simplistic, as long as the proper explanation on the heroes page was more in-depth. But it's not. This barely provides any more information. Again, look at the Thor bubble. It still leaves out most of what it does, but now there's a video that shows it dealing damage to Punisher. On one hand, that's better than not saying it at all, but it's really confusing to have the video and the description be inconsistent. And you still can't learn about the slow from this video. The hero page should show the full details. It should be on par with the website with actual numbers. This is something that other hero shooters are guilty of as well, just not telling the players the numbers anywhere in the game. But even when these other games give vague descriptions, they're still more informative than Marvel Rivals. Some other things this game leaves out: Mantis' heal is simply listed as a heal over time, leaving out the flat 55 health it provides when you apply it. That flat healing means that in a desperate moment you can spam it on an ally to heal them over 200 health quickly. Venom's ultimate says that it deals damage based on the enemy's current health, which is, again, very vague. What it actually means is that it deals half of their remaining health plus 50 damage. Thus, it will never kill anybody above 100 health. Without knowing these specifics, it is very difficult to use this ability optimally. Magneto's kit is built around charging up his mag cannon, which knocks back enemies. The description makes it sound very underwhelming because it leaves out that it knocks them back and holds them there for a second. It means that the best way to learn how this ability actually works is not to read its description, but rather to get hit with it enough times that you realize how punishing it can be. Need I go on? So many things are left unexplained. It should not be a community adventure to discover how the most basic aspects of the game function. This isn't a FromSoft title. As more and more heroes get added, I worry that things are only going to get worse. What happens when we get more heroes whose effects are primarily red? Even things which are currently only used in a few places aren't consistent. Damage buffs are blue on Storm and Mantis, but purple on Luna. The only thing that's consistent is anti-heal also being purple, because that only exists on a single character. I think that NetEase should put the numbers from the website onto the hero page and unify the healing colors. For future skins, they should be more mindful of keeping them visually distinct, and for future maps, pay more attention to making destructible terrain and invisible walls much more intuitively clear. Marvel Rivals is a great game. I don't want it to get bogged down and held back by minor issues that pile up into making it a headache to get into. I think as long as they consider readability going forward, it should all be okay. Yeah, so as I was making this video, Johnny Storm was added to the game, and he has by far the worst differentiation between friend and foe of any character. An allied Human Torch is orange with orange fire, an enemy Human Torch is a slightly redder orange. This is inexcusably bad. It is effectively impossible to differentiate the two. It's difficult when they're sitting still. In the full chaos of battle, it's a nightmare. And what does he do? He creates big areas that damage enemies. That means if it's an enemy Human Torch, you want to avoid those areas, and if it's an allied Human Torch, you want to fight in those areas. Like, do I need to tell you how bad this is? Look at it. You can see how similar these are. Listen, I get that the Human Torch is orange, but Jesus Christ, you can't just ignore readability. Make allied Human Torches yellow and enemy Human Torches a deep red. If the only way I can tell a friend and foe apart is by the name tag above their head, you have messed up your hero shooter. However, it's not just the colors that are a problem. His Pyro Prison is an ability where you can create walls of flames between points which you place, and the surrounded area does 50 damage per second to the enemies inside. If it's a small area where you can clearly see all the points, then it's fine. It's very obvious here which spot is affected, but you can cover a lot of ground with this field. But if it doesn't close properly, then the area inside is entirely safe. You will not take a single tick of damage unless you touch the wall itself. However, the only visual distinction between a sealed and unsealed area is a very subtle fire effect applied throughout. Again, if it's hard to see in the practice range, it's impossible to see it in battle. This means that to know if a massive chunk of the map is safe to exist in, you have to try and scope around, find every point, and see if they connect properly. And it gets even more confusing because the damage ticks don't start until a second or two has passed after the walls are up. That makes sense because you want the move to be reactable, but it means that you can think the area didn't connect properly because nothing happened, and then the damage ticks start coming in while you're right in the middle. Or alternatively, the area is safe, but you booked it out of there thinking you just escaped before the damage started. Oh yeah, and the walls do 65 damage if you cross them, meaning you're punished if you don't successfully sight read this super unclear ability. Sorry lightning confinement, but this move takes your crown for worst visual clarity in the game. The colors, the effects, the timing, it all feels perfectly designed to be a pain in the ass. And it'd be super easy to fix as well. Just make the flame effects inside the area much more noticeable, and have them start up before the damage ticks so people can tell if they need to run. If future heroes have this kind of visual clarity, the game's just going to become unplayable as the roster grows. You already have to scroll in the character select. Imagine them adding another dozen heroes all as muddled and confusing as Johnny here. This needs to be addressed or the game will suffer long term. Learn from this, NetEase, or it'll bite you in the ass. Thanks for watching, folks. Thank you to all my patrons, and an extra special thank you to Audie T, Amy Lech, Ilya Kukushkin, Legitimate Salvage, and Samuel Wagner.